So Tottenham returned to the Champions League last night with a 1-0 win over Villarreal. Thomas Frank's first game as a Champions League manager, far from a classic, but we got the 3 points. So let's get straight into Tottenham 1, Villarreal 0. So going into this game, I think we expected some changes in terms of starting lineup. Not as many as I would have thought. Obviously expected Richarlison to come back in for Tel, who's obviously not registered for the Champions League squad, and expected Bentcourt to come back in, and that's the team we saw really. To my knowledge, that's only two changes. Um, yeah, great start to the game really. A few chances, I say chances. Um, really sort of dominating the ball early on throughout the first half hour, and we took the lead. Very fortunate. Lucas Bergvall cross, which was just somehow blundered into the net by the goalkeeper. Terrible keeping, and I think the goal, really, if I'm honest, was a bit of an indictment on that game. If I'm honest, it really, really was a bit of a drab affair. And yeah, that's about as exciting as it got for Spurs in terms of that game. Obviously, Xavi Simons was making his home debut on the left again. I did mention last time, not 100% sure about Spence and Simmons on that left hand side, just purely because two right footers both wanting to come inside. It sort of feels like they can get in each other's way. So part of me was expecting Destiny Udogie to start. I think he did come on eventually. But Spence stuck at that with that left back spot. And, after the goal, there was, I thought at least that, and I'm sure many others did, that there's real initiative to push on and, maybe get two or three goals on to our name, where obviously things like goal difference will be as important as ever in this new Champions League format. But it just seemed like we got the goal and then just seemed to just seemed to take our foot off the gas. And there was a couple of chances where we played a few Villarreal players in. Not in the sense that it was straight to them, but we allowed them a few chances. There was one for Buchanan who put it wide, where Porro come across, and Van der Ven and Romero. Obviously, we know that Van der Ven's going to be the guy that Romero steps in, Van der Ven drops off, and that sort of thing. But there's a couple of times where in the first half, Van der Ven would jump in and be the aggressor, and sometimes Villarreal moved it round him, nearly got in, but obviously you've got Romero covering in that occasion, and yeah, it was just a really drab game. It really was. But look, I'd take that over us playing fantastically well and losing 1-0. We're going to need all the points we can get in this Champions League new league phase. And Villarreal, was reading online that they're not the sort of team that would come out and look to play football. I think it might have been, I was reading an article on them, and I think it said that the last victory that they had, because I know they lost to Atletico Madrid in the game just gone on the weekend, but the one before the international break had like 32% possession and ended up winning. I think it was 3-0. I think I read. So I wasn't expecting them to come out and play, but it almost seemed like that goal went in and nothing changed for them. And I don't think we were great. I really don't. I think there's a lot of sloppy balls in there. Um, Loads of mishit passes, maybe poor choice of pass when we are moving forward. But yeah, in terms of the first half, there wasn't, I'm trying to think of anything else. There was a brief Richarlison penalty appeal, which wasn't a penalty. Optimistic. But in terms of the goal, it come from quite a nice little counter attack from Spurs. And one thing I did notice with Bergvall, which I think is a testament to his footballing IQ, is that he could have took the ball in a lot quicker, with a lot more, emphasis. But he's very clever in the way that he sort of broke at pace and then slowed himself down a bit, and you could see the cavalry arriving. Richarlison's obviously was going to be in the middle, but then you've got Xavi Simons, who was sort of pulling towards the edge of the box. And I think that allowed Richarlison to pull backwards once Xavi Simons made that movement. And obviously that ball comes from it. It's a goal. And I think Bergvall, along with Bentancur, was probably our best player in the first half, if not all game. I really, really think he did see the appeal of having Bentancur in a game like that. And look, I don't think that Spurs is, minor issues that we're having at the start of the season in terms of build-up play. Whilst Bentancur's not the answer, I feel like a game like that where you expected more possession, he's probably a better fit than someone like Paulinho, especially if you've got the likes of Sarr and Bergvall who are going to push on ahead of him. And it was one of them games where I think Bentancur was really good. I really do. It's one of them where you can just get that calm sense. You don't need to always go and chase the game. And look, that might have been to Spurs' detriment. It could come to January and we might be saying, why did we not go and get more goals against Villarreal? Because that could end up costing us, but who knows? For the minute, at least, it's a good result. And back to Bentancur, I really, really thought that he had a great game. Really calm, knowing when to play the ball, when to move his body to open up space. And he was just a very, very calm figure in the midfield. And I thought you could see why Frank went with Bentancur instead of Paulinho in that sense. Just purely because I feel like Paulinho is something that many people have been highlighting, and I don't think it's as tragic as people make out the incident, the limitations of Paulinho. But one thing I did notice against West Ham is that he can't really receive the ball on the turn that well. And someone like Bentancur, he's almost got them sort of snake-like hips where he can just ease in and out of trouble. And there's a couple of times where he dropped the shoulder, and it was just a really classy, just sort of figure of play where you'd get the ball and you'd sort of say, "Let's calm down. Let's not go and go crazy with this." Sort of like we might have done under Postecoglou last year. And look, I think there's a perfect middle ground between Frank and Postecoglou, and I think Frank's capable of finding that middle ground, whether that be this season or next season. But I think one thing that will definitely help us with that is if in defensive midfield you've got someone like an Adam Wharton, someone like that. How attainable he is now, I'm not 100% sure. I think if we were to get him this summer, it was definitely the chance to get him. But you could see yesterday that Villarreal, they're quite comfortable just sitting off. And I think after half hour, the game really, really fizzled out. It really did. It was almost sort of played at like a testimonial pace. And look, there's chances Villarreal weren't completely just sat on the edge of their own box. There's a couple of times I think Nicolas Pepe put one wide which went off of Van der Ven. So they're definitely there to take there to punish us when they thought that they had the chance to. And yeah, into the second half, again, much of the same, but I thought we were really, really sloppy in the second half. I mentioned about mishit passes and that sort of thing, but I just feel like every area of our game was really, really sloppy. Defensively, I think we looked a bit nervous. Van der Ven and Romero, a couple times they were sort of done by that ball over the top. Obviously, Van der Ven doesn't get done that often by that ball because he's sort of best equipped to deal with that. But there was a couple nervy moments, especially with Van der Ven. There was one late tackle, I say tackle that he made, which I was certain was a penalty. It's actually quite a few yards outside of the box in the end, but I think he was quite lucky to not get sent off. If I'm honest, if the shoe was on the other foot, I would be saying that should be a red card, but it's not. It wasn't given, and then Pepe put that free kick wide. Also, Xavi Simons, I think he had quite a good game, really, in the sense that he he wasn't a standout by any means, but I feel like the what we did see from him was encouraging. And one thing that I don't know if, this is sort of a preconceived idea of Xavi Simons, but he's one of the first players I can remember who was like a social media star at like a young age when he was at Barcelona and he had the long sort of afro, and then almost seems like everyone's knew about him even since before he was a footballer. So in my head, I think of him as like quite a gaunt, lean, um, lean sort of player whose maybe strength isn't his strong point. But one thing I will say, since I've seen him arrive and play in a Tottenham shirt, is he's actually built a lot more than I thought he was. You can see he's quite strong, holds off his man quite well. And again, look, it's one of them games. He's used to playing through the middle. Obviously, with Leipzig, he's played on the left before, but I don't think that's his primary position. I think probably an area of the squad building, which has sort of become an issue in terms of having a lot of players who can fill in places but don't necessarily specialize in that position. And that left wing role at the minute, which seems to be Simmons for the taking, at least for now. All of the options there. If you go through all of them, you've got Simmons, Johnson, Kudus can play on the left, Odeberg can play on the left, Tell can play on the left. I don't know. I think I've said Johnson, but that's five players who, yes, they can play on the left, but they're not necessarily a specialist out there. And I wonder if part of me, I think in my head, long term, I think the vision for Simmons is to go through the middle. And I don't know if these games are just sort of easing him in, let him sort of build momentum, build relationships with his teammates. But I thought he was okay. I couldn't fault anything that he'd done with the ball. I thought he was quite good, a lot stronger. There's a few really nice touches in the first half. Um, and then I think he was quite fortunate to not be sent off. He did get a booking in the first half, which I thought was a little bit harsh. And then I guess it sort of evens itself out because it was one of the most obvious yellow card tackles I've seen. And, you know, the ref decided not to intervene with the yellow. Obviously, with VAR, you can't give back for a yellow card offence. It can only be a straight red, which is probably why it's worked in our favour in that sense. But I just thought we were quite sloppy throughout most of it. It's obviously expected, really, when we're starting to get to the point in the season where players are coming back from international break and they're maybe not fully up to speed for the start of a new season, and starting to get into that Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday, or Wednesday, Saturday, whatever sort of schedule it is, where you're looking at probably 2 games a week for the foreseeable now, obviously depending on the League Cup. But yeah, we are just a bit sloppy. Like Bergval was really good. Bergval really good again, and I feel like he's really getting into the groove now. In pre-season, he looked a little bit off it, which is expected because it's pre-season, and then you factor in that he's 19. He's still got a lot of development to do. He's recovering from an injury, wasn't that shocked, but I feel like now he's really, really starting to flourish, and I wonder if that was sort of in Frank's mind as to why he didn't play him against Bournemouth. He brought him on against Bournemouth, and I feel like the game opened up a lot more when he come on. But he's really getting into the groove now, and I've noticed this little trick he likes to do, and it is so aesthetically pleasing. It's almost sort of like a ball roll with his right foot, and he'll roll the ball with his right foot inside onto his left, and then just do a step over and sort of dummy, and it's working. It seems to be working, and it is just a joy to watch. He's going to be a great player, and I think he's already becoming a great player at 19. And I feel like that Champions League stage is built for him. Kudus again wasn't necessarily his best game, but he's just solid. He really is. And that first half hour, I feel like a lot was going through him, and it's something that we've missed on the right hand side. whether it be Johnson, Kulusevski, both great players with different skill sets, but that unpredictability of Kudus, knowing that, because with Brennan Johnson, if I was a defender marking him, I'd know that Brennan Johnson's not the type where he'd want to take on a man and get across into a box. He's very much a sort of, you know, he likes to attack space. And obviously Kulusevski likes to come in on his left-hand side, so you'll sort of know that it's coming, and if it is going onto his right foot, it could be quick and then sort of a cut back. But with Kudus, I feel like he's equally adept with both feet, and he was just really good, really, really good. In the first half, dropped off in the second half. Um, yeah, I feel like he's a player which is built for this Champions League stage, and he's just an absolute game changer for Tottenham. And I really, really hope that he can stay fit, given how many injuries we seem to suffer, because I think he's a great player, really, really good player. And it's almost sort of like it's a weird one, because when signings come in, you say they need time, you can't judge people off of the first few games, that sort of thing. And look, it could come back to bite me, but I just think the quality that Kudus has instantly from the first PSG game, from the first game that we played in pre-season, actually, the Reading game. I remember going to that, and I say remember like it was years ago. It was only probably about a month or two ago, but even then, you could just see that there was something a bit different. Maybe that was because Brennan Johnson started on the right, and then there's a bit of a stark contrast. But Kudus, really, really good. Um, and we saw a debut for Kolo Muani, who come on. I don't think that he's fully up to speed, which is probably why he didn't start against West Ham. Which is probably why he didn't get picked for France. Fit and firing last season with Juventus, come back to PSG almost with the knowledge that he's not going to get in there. So maybe a bit rusty, come on. And if I'm honest, he didn't do a lot. Is only really the only thing of note was a yellow card that he picked up. And it was one of them games we made it a lot harder than it should have been. And it wasn't a vintage Tottenham performance, but it's one that gets us on the board. And to say the first step to getting ahead is getting started, and that's what we've done in the Champions League. Thomas Frank's obviously got that first win as a Champions League manager, so that'd be nice for him to sort of have that monkey off his back in terms of like some people the narratives they'll say about him. So it's nice to sort of address that early and get it out of the way. And then moving on to Brighton, which is Saturday, 3 o'clock. Away at the Amex is a stadium where under Postecoglou last year we lost 3-2 after being 2-0 up, lost 4-2 the year before. And Brighton are one of them teams, they've took apart Man City this year. They've took apart, various teams, including us, over the past few years, whether that be through De Zerbi, Potter, or Hertzler. But they're a great team. And I think it's going to be a lot harder than some people are given of maybe expecting, because I think you can read into the 3-0 win at West Ham, the 2-0 win at Man City, the wins against Burnley and Villarreal. And look, we've been good. We've not been perfect, but we've been good. But the Bournemouth game really, really highlighted how, there's issues in terms of how we advance the ball. And look, I'm a hypocrite, because when a lot of people raise these concerns about João Paulinho when he signed, I wouldn't say dismissive, but I wasn't reading into it that much. But I fear that if Brighton if they really want to go and press us high and sort of leave that space for, like Bournemouth did, where if it is a Bentancur and Paulinho that he goes for, which it could be considering we're away from home. I think if we're at home, it might be a bit of a different team. But they really don't want to play them balls that will split the lines and push up the pitch. A lot of the heavy lifting in terms of build up has been done by Romero and Van der Ven. Obviously, Van der Ven, I wouldn't say he's as an accomplished passer of the ball than Romero. And that's not to shoot him down. I think Romero is just superb at it. But it's going to be interesting. I don't think there'll be too many changes in terms of the team that we see on Saturday. But I do wonder, I think the midfield is key. That's going to win us the game or it's going to lose us the game. I think Bentancur and Paulinho, I understand the idea going away from home, but I think Bournemouth have shown that if you want to be brave against Tottenham, like Brighton will do, because Brighton are at home, they know that teams don't like coming to the Amex, and that Brighton now have a good reputation for being, one of these teams that can land a knockout blow, regardless of how big the opponent is. I think we can definitely get a result there. We 100% can get a result there. And this might come across as a bit negative. It's not. I'm just a bit wary of some of the issues that were sort of highlighted last month against Bournemouth, and then obviously some of the issues that were there last night. I think Brighton are going to be a lot braver than Villarreal, so there's an opportunity for that to work in our favour. But in terms of the midfield three, I don't see how you drop Bergvall at the minute, and I don't see how you drop Sarr, basically, because I think they've been really, really good. And then I guess it's a shootout between Bentancur and Paulinho. Simmons, I'd like to see through the middle. Eventually, I don't know when we'll see that, but you do wonder if Simmons is to be through the middle, then how do you fit Sarr in? How do you fit Bergvall in? How do you fit Bentancur or Paulinho? It's going to be only 2 slots for 4 players. That's if Simmons is to go through the middle. Because we've seen Bergvall or Sarr, I think the last couple of games, Bergvall's probably been that more advanced. And I think he suits that better than Pap Sarr, which we've sort of seen against Bournemouth, that Sarr's very good at getting us high up the pitch, but it's almost like once he gets up the pitch, I don't think he's fantastic at, finding that ball that was split a defence. If it's a ball that's semi-open, I think he's really good at that and he can do that. But in terms of like picking a lock, I don't think that's Sarr's game. I think quite a lot that we've seen last season is Sarr likes to arrive late into the box and, get on the end of chances. He's starting to get quite a few goals for Spurs now. I think he's got 10 in all comps now. But yeah, it's going to be interesting whether we maybe see, Frank go for someone like Paulinho and Bentancur, who are a little bit more protected away from home, and then maybe you put Simmons in that 10 position. Now he's had a couple of games to get, sort of feel for his new teammates and that sort of thing. And then is Brennan Johnson coming on the left because, he's our joint top scorer still with 2 goals this season, which obviously you can't read a lot into because it's mid-September. But yeah, I think in terms of the tactical battle that will come against Brighton next season on Saturday, next weekend, I think it's going to be an interesting one. And if I was to call it now, I really, really wouldn't know where to go. But it's one of them that if we can come away from that game with 3 points, that would be a great week for Frank, for the players, for the fans, for the whole club. It'd be a great week. Remains to be seen whether it will happen. But we won't know until Saturday at 3. So I guess, yeah, we'll just have to wait till then and hope that, Spurs can do the job again, get the 3 points. If we are splitting hairs, I would like a little bit more enjoyment than last night's game. But who am I to be, making these demands? Tottenham back in the Champions League, though, back amongst the wins in Europe. I think that's over 20 games at home now in Europe that we've not lost. I think the last one probably would have been Red Bull Leipzig, maybe, just before COVID. I think that might be the last one. That was definitely our last Champions League defeat at home. But yeah, overall, Bentancur, Bergvall, Kudus, really good. Simmons, okay. And yeah, it was ugly, but we got it done, and that's what matters. When it comes to January or February, whenever the last Champions League phase game is, if we're honest, we're not going to be looking back at this one as, you know, why were we not more entertaining? As long as we get the 3 points, that's what matters at this stage in knockout football. I think in the league it's a bit different. Yes, you want results, but obviously you want to see some sort of continuity. And look, if that's the way we're going to play in Europe and we're going to be a bit more conservative, then I don't hate it if it gets results. But this is the classic style versus substance argument, which seems to have really, really rambled on um, since Pochettino left at Tottenham, I'd say, because obviously you got Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, all pragmatic managers. Then you had Ange, who was just the most extremist of attacking managers. And, there was, I think, like most things in life, the balance is somewhere in the middle. And I'm hoping that over the course of the season, we can see all the strings to Frank's bow. If we need to play ugly, he can do it. If we do need to be a bit more expansive, a bit more open, I'd like to see us do it. But yeah, Brighton on Saturday, another win for Spurs in the Champions League, marking a good week. And yeah, I guess next time you'll hear from me will be after the Brighton game, where hopefully Spurs have took 3 points from the Amex. And if you have enjoyed this video and you've got all this way, then hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to be doing a podcast every single week, maybe 2 a week, depending on the sort of fixtures. But yeah, really, really planning on pushing, having a real go with this, and a very, very exciting project, which will be dropping within the next month, which I'm excited for those of you who do watch this to see. And a piece that, if I'm honest, I'm really proud of and can't wait to share with everyone. So if you do want to see that, subscribe to make sure that when it does drop, you don't miss anything. And until the next one, at Spurs.